Hey everyone, this is Mitch from GamerRN. I recently finished up a 3 game stint of Platinum trophies, and I wanted to change up the console I was playing on for a bit. I have this big shelf full of Switch games, and I decided I wanted to try to knock a few of them out, and try to dig into my backlog. So I decided to pick up a random game and threw it to my Switch and went with it. I actually picked up Ys Origin, and I just wanted to clarify this at the beginning. I own Ys 8 and 9 on Steam and on Switch, but I have not played either of them yet. But when I looked at this game, I figured why not start here and slowly work myself through the series. I've been wanting to eventually play the ones I own, plus I can pick up Ys 1 and 2 on Steam and probably play those to completion. But I honestly don't have a lot of experience with this game series. If you're someone like me and you don't know anything about this game, let me go ahead and enlighten you on it, and explain where this game falls within the timeline. But before we jump into the backstory, I just wanted to say thanks for joining me. And like the name of this video, if you've never played Ys Origins or any Ys game whatsoever, I want this review to offer you the chance to decide if this game or series of games is something you like or are interested in diving into. So I hope you find it helpful in some way in making that decision. But anyways, Ys Origins was originally released back in 2006, and it was supposed to be a prequel to the long-running Ys franchise. This game had a big reputation of delivering a game with classic action and RPG elements while also having an engaging story as well as having fast-paced combat. In recent years, this game was brought back and delivered on multiple different platforms for fans of the series to experience its origin, pun intended. While I will also be covering this in the story section for the game, I do want to state that this game takes place about 700 years before the events of the first 2 games in the series, if I did my research correctly, so don't quote me on anything. With that little bit of backstory behind us, let's jump into the review. Thanks again for stopping by. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Before we jump into the story of Ys Origin, we have to go over the world of Ys itself. The beginning of the game opens up with a cutscene discussing some elements from the story, but it also talks about the floating city, the Solomon Shrine. Now, Solomon Shrine was one of the last places that was called a safe haven for the human race. The people of Solomon Shrine were forced into the sky by invading demonic forces. Unable to completely fight back and eventually being overrun by the demons, the people of Ys use an item known as the Black Pearl to lift Solomon Shrine. After this, the ground world becomes completely barren as everything becomes overrun with demons. The only places still on the surface that have life to them are 2 trees called the Rhoda trees. Now, a majority of the story does take place in a large tower that consists of roughly 25 levels plus the summit. However, this tower does play a big role in world building since it was originally constructed by the demons as a way to potentially reach Solomon Shrine. Although they won't be able to physically reach it, you will later learn in the story what can happen to the Solomon Shrine from atop the tower. Throughout your journey through the tower, you will encounter multiple different themed floors, which will allow for different types of enemies, traps, as well as obstacles that the main characters will face. Besides that, the world itself, when you finally manage to go outside of the tower, definitely has a dark and dreary feeling to it. This really helps build on the atmosphere and ambiance that the game is going for. I definitely think the setup for this world at the beginning was done great. And even though you're stuck in the tower the entire game, as you continue through the story and learn about the world of Ys, you can see how the Dark Tower builds on the barren wasteland that once housed the people of Ys. Now, I didn't want to ruin a bunch of the story yet by talking about the world building or giving a backstory on the game, but I thought it was necessary to have some knowledge before actually discussing the story. So like I mentioned before at the beginning of the video, you'll be introduced with a cutscene explaining the world and how Solomon Shrine was lifted into the sky after the demons attacked. After the cutscene, you will see a few different characters transporting themselves down to the surface from Solomon Shrine. But unfortunately, they are attacked and the transport spell is broken, and they're all separated and fall to the surface. Depending on who you decide to play as, you'll awaken in front of one of the last grassy and practically living areas, either the elder Rhoda tree or the younger Rhoda tree. Like I said, it just depends on which character you're playing as, but you will explain to the Rhoda tree why you've returned to the surface, which was to search and protect the 2 missing goddesses since they just seemingly disappeared without a trace. The Rhoda trees will both instruct you that they feel the goddesses present within the tower since they do seem to have a very good connection with them. And after this, you will arrive within the tower and that's when the real journey begins. Now, I don't want to dive all the way into the story and tell you every little detail about it, so I'm just going to give you a broad overview. As you play through the story, no matter if you decide to play Unica or Hugo, the story will follow their journey throughout the tower as they traverse it in order to rescue the goddesses. You'll fight similar bosses for both characters, but they do have different stories and events that take place. A quick example for Unica is that the demon that killed her father is part of the Darklings, and Unica has feelings of guilt for not taking down the enemy that murdered her dad. Where Hugo has this extremely dark and depressing and sad encounter with the Darklings where he kind of befriends one of them and then it ends horribly. And it honestly kind of hurt at the end. Now, there is also a third character that you can play through the game as, but I honestly completed the playthrough on Unica, which took me way longer than I expected, and a playthrough on Hugo, which was a lot smoother for me. So when I finally unlocked the third character, I didn't want to play the game again, because at this point, I had my fun with the game, and I really just wanted to move on to the next one. I may revisit this game sometime in the future and play as the last character, but we'll have to see about that. Overall, I really enjoyed the story for this game, especially being someone who has never played an Ys game or doesn't really know anything about the series. This game did a great job at explaining the backstory to help the player understand how we ended up where we're at. I never felt like I was missing anything or like I didn't understand something in the game. There are not many things within this game's story that you won't be able to use deduction skills and understand what is going on. So even if you've never played an Ys game, Ys Origin is not a bad place to start experiencing the series. So like I said, there's 3 different playable characters. I will be talking about each one of them briefly here, discussing the playstyle and what my experience was like. Let's start off with Unica Tova, the granddaughter to one of the 6 priests and daughter to one of the Holy Knight captains who stayed behind on the surface to defend Solomon Shrine as it raised into the sky. Unica, being the grandkid of one of the 6 priests, has no magical ability whatsoever. However, Unica's father was the original leader of the Holy Knights, so with this massive reputation, she's going to have a lot to live up to. My time spent playing as Unica was honestly really fun. At the very beginning, Unica can feel pretty powerful. Her ability to swing a massive axe around like it's nothing makes her playstyle very simple also. Unica will continue to discover different abilities which range from her Whirlwind to her Thunderstrike, and discovering her father's sword and unlocking the Phoenix Strike ability. Unica can be a more difficult playstyle due to her being a pure physical fighter, since she does need to get in close to every single enemy to do effective damage. However, her Phoenix Strike can be charged up and kind of be made into more of like a ranged attack, but sometimes you're better off just dishing out as much damage as you can up close and personal. The last thing I want to discuss about Unica is how picking her as your main character affects the story. Now, it doesn't exactly matter which character you pick, the overall story and outcome will be roughly the same. What does change is how Unica interacts with the goddesses throughout the story, and the journey she undergoes to find out what happened to her dad. Hugo Fact is up next, and he is the son of one of the 6 priests. Hugo being a sorcerer and being considered a magical prodigy. I had a lot more fun and an easier time with him than I did with Unica personally. Hugo does possess the Eyes of Fact, which seem to be like a treasure passed down throughout his family. The eyes can replicate whatever magic Hugo is performing or going to perform, which basically triples the damage output. Even with Hugo being a sorcerer, he isn't exactly squishy either. You don't exactly have to worry about dying right away if you get hit. Hugo does have access to 3 skills, but they do differ from Unica's. Hugo's first skill is an ability called Force Shield, and his second one is Trip Mine, and lastly the Flame Wheel. Other than the Flame Wheel, I didn't really care for the other 2 abilities that Hugo had. They aren't bad in any means, but I just wasn't the biggest fan of them. I had a way easier time playing as Hugo since he is a ranged attacker and has access to the eyes, which, like I said, basically can triple your damage output. Now, real quick, I'm going to briefly discuss how Hugo's story is different from Unica's. There may be some spoilers, so if you want to skip this section, go ahead and do that now. Hugo comes down to the surface with a mission from his dad, and he's told that his brother was alive on the surface but fighting with the demons. Now, Hugo's brother was down there fighting with Unica's father. So a majority of Hugo's story is him trying to find out and accept who he is, and also find out what happened to his brother. I really enjoyed Hugo's story. For me, it was way more emotionally involving. Lastly, there's Toll Fact, who's the last playable character, and he will be unlocked after completing the game with either Unica or Hugo. I personally have not played with Toll. I played 2 playthroughs of this game and I kind of got tired and didn't really want to sit through another one. So I can't exactly speak on his playstyle or his abilities or even the story that he has to tell, but I will say if it's anything like Unica's or Hugo's, then it probably is really enjoyable to play as Toll. I do want to go over the enemies and bosses that you'll be going up against throughout this game. I'll start with the generic enemies that you will face throughout the game and through multiple different floors. Now, a majority of these enemies will just be basic demons and reskin versions of some demons that you've already faced. Honestly, with the regular demons you face in between floors, there won't be much of a challenge. Most of the difficulty from this game will come from the bosses. Now, even though I say the difficulty will come from the bosses, That doesn't exactly mean you're going to struggle with all of them. Most of the bosses only have 2 to 3 different attacks that you have to look out for. Finding a rhythm to fight them isn't exactly that hard. But to be totally honest, with the majority of these bosses, you can try to just brute strength through them, as long as you can dodge a majority of the attacks. For me personally, I did have to repeat some of the boss fights multiple times. Not due to difficulty, but mostly due to the fact that I was impatient and I tried to just beat them up as fast as possible. But there was 2 bosses that did give me some difficulty. The Mantis just took so much time due to the fact that you did such little damage to it. The Mantis for me personally is kind of what ruined Unica's playthrough and made me almost not want to go back to it. I did stop playing through Unica's playthrough at the Mantis because I couldn't beat it because it took so much time. And then I started playing as Hugo, and then I decided to finally go back and play as Unica. And honestly, the only reason the final boss was difficult is because, same thing, it takes a little bit of time and there's multiple different stages. Overall, the bosses for this game were a ton of fun and provided a lot of variety throughout the game. They didn't feel like they added too many bosses either. It felt like the right amount of boss enemies. And it actually made me feel like I was progressing throughout the game when I beat one. So as you progress throughout the game, you will be defeating different enemies and gaining experience and leveling up. You will be collecting different pieces of equipment such as armor and boots, which will help increase the defense of your characters. You will also continue to unlock new skills as you progress throughout the game. You'll find different gems which you can use to upgrade those skills. And you will also collect different items as you continue your adventure that can help you with different puzzles or solving different issues that can help progress the story. Also, this game has a super simple leveling system where you just kill, gain experience, level up. There's really not too much to it. The game does also offer an upgrade system. Now, a majority of these upgrades will take a lot of time to get to. But whenever you finally manage to get some of them, it can be very useful. For me, I didn't really notice too much difference in the actual gameplay of the game when I was upgrading different things. However, I'm sure it did make some sort of difference. But I would honestly just spend the amount to actually upgrade those things and never really pay attention to it. I'm only going to briefly discuss the combat since I've been talking about it for a majority of this review. Ys Origin offers a fast-paced combat that combines melee and magical attacks. Each character that you have the ability to play as has their own style that's unique to them, Unica being the heavy-hitting melee brute and Hugo relying on his ranged magical attacks. And like I said earlier in the review, I can't really speak on how Toll's playstyle is because I didn't play as him. Each character has access to 3 different skills that they will be able to find different items such as gems throughout the tower to continue to upgrade, which will make those skills even better. The combat for this game is extremely simple and it's extremely fun. And even on the Switch, it was fast paced, but it was controlled super well, and I didn't really have any issues with it. Now, I normally don't discuss the soundtrack or the audio for games, but this game's soundtrack was honestly super great. And audio normally isn't really a big deal to me when playing games, but I definitely noticed it more with this game. The soundtrack for this game seems to have high energy rock as well as orchestral elements that can really heighten and elevate the level of gameplay. Especially during the boss fights or even just regular combat, the soundtrack just really increases the intensity of those fights. Plus, the audio can really complement the combat by giving you the effects of having satisfying hits. The spell sounds are very good, and even the ambiance the soundtrack can give off in some areas of the tower can really make you feel how dark and dreary this tower truly is. The game also offers minimal voice acting and doesn't primarily focus on that. It does primarily focus on written dialogue to tell the story. If you're a big fan of older games, this can kind of give you a sense of nostalgia. If you're not a fan of it, honestly, it's one of those little things that you probably can look by. Now, the retail price for this game is $19.99, and I definitely think this game is worth that price. With a lot of replayability options available that range from multiple different characters, or even just the boss rush mode that the game has available, that there's so many reasons to keep playing this game. The combat and soundtrack are extremely fun and go well together. I personally do think this is a game you should dive into even now in 2024. You won't be diving halfway through a series, so you won't be very confused. Plus, I personally think that this is the best way to start the Ys series, especially since you don't need the backstory, and this game can explain a lot of things about the world. The game can also definitely bring some nostalgia back from the early 2000s. So why not pick this game up and give it a try for yourself? I think you'll have a ton of fun with it, just like I did. But anyways, that's my review of Ys Origin. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. If there's any games you want to see me review or pursue the 100% or Platinum trophy, then drop a comment down below. Lastly, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.